evening, everybody. It's 7:08. I was told मेरी घड़ी आगे है. मैंने कहा आजकल घड़ी आगे नहीं होती है. ये सब mobile phone are all well coordinated and synced from some satellite or the other. Good evening. It's a great pleasure indeed to welcome all of you to this 6th InfraKatha. This is part of a monthly series we started with the Infravision Foundation, and I'm so delighted that it has had such wonderful sessions so far and promises a great future as well, from what I'm hearing. And today we have somebody who I'm told is part of the family, but is also a great expert and a wonderful guest, Shailesh Kochhar, in conversation with Jagan, Shah, who is, of course, the CEO of the Infravision Foundation, on artificial intelligence reshaping the digital infrastructure landscape. Now, AI is the buzzword these days, and every single sphere of human activity appears to be infected by it. So this is, as far as the digital infrastructure landscape is concerned, where it's a little more plausible, actually, to have the use of AI. Very brief introductions. I've got very long ones for both of you, but may I just abbreviate them a bit? So just very, very briefly, Shailesh is an engineering leader focused on design and implementation of large-scale machine learning products and teams and systems to scale them. He has worked with Amazon, Google, Eight Step Foundation, founded by Nandan Nilekani, then again Amazon, ShareChat. So I'm just skipping through his biodata, but obviously it means that he's really conversant with the subject that we are going to be dealing with, having worked with the greatest IT majors. And Jagan is CEO of the Infravision Foundation. His previous roles include senior advisor capacity building at the World Bank and senior infrastructure advisor in the UK's Department for International Development. As he was also in this campus as director of the National Institute of Urban Affairs, which is housed here. And he co-created the Smart Cities mission and incubated centers for digital governance, sanitation, and climate adaptation. You were also part of the draft master plan for Delhi 2024. So I'll leave it at that. He has done many other things, as we say nowadays as well. So thank you very much for both of you for being here. And I leave you to carry on this conversation in the 6th InfraKatha series. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Welcome, Shailesh.
Thank you so much, Jagan.
And thank you, Suneet, for the introductions. You do have a deck of slides, and let's get started with that.
We'll get that. Yeah. Okay. So before I get started in getting into some of the things that I have thought about talking about, I thought maybe it'd be good to just get a sense in the room about what do people think about of artificial intelligence? Like, what do you all think is artificial intelligence? Anybody wants to throw something out there? Yes.
It's just the opposite of natural stupidity.
It is the opposite of natural stupidity. Yes, I think that's a good one. That's a good starting point. But anything else? Anybody else wants to take?
To take over one's mind. I think that's what makes it so scary for our generation.
It's scary because it threatens to take over our minds. Yeah, very much true. Very true. Anybody else?
It's a cool buddy.
It's a cool buddy. It's a really cool buddy that can help us do a lot of things. Yeah, it's like having, but it may go wrong sometimes. Yeah, absolutely. It's like having, like many cool buddies do, lead us astray, take us down the wrong path, bad influences in our lives. Yeah, so artificial intelligence could end up being a bad influence in our lives. Okay, that's great. I mean, it's nice to get this, little bit of thoughts from people about what artificial intelligence is. So I'm going to sort of, spend most of my time today, like the first 10, 12 minutes talking about artificial intelligence and work. I think, we are in many ways at a very, pivotal moment in the future of what work is going to be like. It is eminently possible that in the next 10 years or so, about 1 billion jobs in the world will just disappear. About 1 in 5 jobs from a 5 billion global workforce will just cease to exist because of artificial intelligence. And as people, we have a very complex and multifaceted relationship with work. Work is our economic leverage. It's like the thing that allows us to earn a living and survive in this world. Work is also very, very deeply tied up with who we are. I'm an engineer, somebody else is an artist, somebody is an entrepreneur, somebody is a, CEO. So work is just very inextricably woven into our identity of who we are. And if, your work goes away, then people will have a little bit of a, loss of identity. And then the final part of work is, it's kind of our purpose. It's the thing that we wake up for in the morning and, set out to do in the rest of our day. And artificial intelligence is going to fundamentally alter both the way that we work and what that work actually means to us as individuals. So this is not the first time that people have come face to face with automation of their work. About 200 years ago, there were groups of textile workers in England who revolted against the introduction of mechanized looms in textile factories. And that was the birth of the first industrial revolution. And these Luddites, and we use that term today as a sort of like a negative term, but the Luddites were revolting against, their craft, which they had honed over many hundreds of years, being replaced by machines, which in many ways just threatened their livelihoods. And it was a time in history where something that had never happened before was happening, where machines were being able to replace the work of humans. And in the last 200 years, as industrialization has grown and we have mass production and assembly lines and computers and robots, entire industries have become more efficient in how they work. We have, as a civilization, been able to, make huge strides in how we produce large quantities of goods incredibly cheaply. And we've been able to do that by automating many human skills that were once considered irreplaceable, right? And as that has happened, slowly but surely, our reliance on human labor has decreased. And so this wealth of industrialization has forced the world to adapt. It has changed the nature of work over the last 100 years. And from a labor economy, we have shifted into a knowledge economy. If machines could replace and, reduce the value of the output of our arms and legs, the mind and the brain was a fortress. And that was the one thing that provided security. It was a fortress that birthed a whole bunch of new professions and honed many, many new skills. And those skills led to the birth of a workforce and a generation of knowledge workers who enjoyed great prosperity because their work had immense amount of economic leverage and they had great productive capacity. And this economic leverage propelled the white-collar jobs and the white-collar workers of today into an upper middle class, which has been ever growing over, most of the 20th century. So we are now today, with the birth of AI and with generative AI and ChatGPT and Claude and all these other AI tools coming to the forefront, at the threshold of another industrial revolution. And there are creative professionals, artists, filmmakers, musicians, software engineers, entrepreneurs, and many other knowledge professionals today who are grappling with this idea that now there is a new machinery that can today improve, augment, and amplify their capabilities, but in a few years' time could potentially replicate their work. And generative AI is a technology that can produce text, it can produce images, it can produce videos, it can pass high school maths tests. There are, medical AIs that can pass medical licensing exams. There are legal AIs that can, analyze civil and criminal legal matters. So there are all kinds of digital, these like digital artifacts and digital tasks which artificial intelligence can do with some degree of competence today. And over the next 5-10 years, it is very, very possible that we will leap from going and from artificial intelligence playing a role in the digital domain to playing a role in the physical domain. Artificial intelligence will be able to produce real world actions. It will be able to provide strategic decisions. And maybe at some point may even be able to, draft public policy. So these last few examples that I'm giving are definitely a leap of imagination. We're not there yet. But with every passing advancement, with every year, with every new research paper that gets published in this domain, the gap between where we are and where we could be becomes smaller. And more than the gap becoming smaller, the incentives to be the first are so strong because of the incredible power that is available that it becomes almost inevitable that we are going to make this leap sooner rather than later. Now, for the highly skilled professionals, artificial intelligence is probably the ultimate companion. It is the buddy that you spoke about, right? It will allow us to learn. It will allow us to, we will learn how to maximize the use of artificial intelligence to magnify our capabilities. To some extent, all the images that you're seeing here today in this slide have all been generated by me by using AI tools, right? I'm no digital artist, but with just a few minutes of prompting, I'm able to produce some very nice images, right? So in many ways like this, it's going to sort of really amplify and extend our capabilities into areas which we could never have possibly conceived of before. But at the same time, it'll also allow highly skilled people to really craft new workflows, new ways of working, which kind of magnify their ability to do things. And what that's going to do is create more time for them. That time can be used to develop new skills, to take on new endeavors, or perhaps even just enjoy a better work-life balance. But what about the rest? So while for the highly skilled amongst us, AI is going to be an incredible tool and a companion, there is the other side of it, which is that in almost half the occupations that exist in the world, about a third, or maybe even more, maybe even like half of the work that people do is so repetitive that it can be automated. And that means that, 50% of the world, so if you look at these, like I've tried to show the green part is the 50% that doesn't get affected, but the other 50%, almost 1/3 of those is basically going to be stuff that is like ripe for automation. And so 1 in 5 people may not have a productive job 10 years from now. So what are the areas where this is most likely to happen? It is the highly repetitive kind of tasks in areas, say, like manufacturing or logistics or retail. Anytime somebody is doing the same thing over and over again, that's ripe for automation. In sort of retrieval and processing of knowledge, repetitive knowledge like data entry or administration or customer service. These are areas where people will, see a lot more automation, a lot more sort of tools coming in that allow one person to do the work of maybe what 10 people did earlier. So it's not like some of these jobs will entirely disappear, but what will happen is that efficiency drives will mandate that same amount of work is done by smaller number of people. And similarly, there are lots of services in the gig economy and freelance professions, which will also sort of start to get affected by things like, these AI tools. And this is why entrepreneurs, investors, and the highly skilled professionals are so invested in being the first to make the leap into the world of AI. And the reason is that the rewards of being first are so disproportionate and they're never equally distributed that the incentives are to, get there first. And while technology tends to be neutral, human beings are most certainly not neutral. And technology is never developed in a vacuum. Technology is always developed within the structures and the institutions and the people who are responsible for developing it. And artificial intelligence, in many ways, what these systems are doing is taking the sum total of human experience and condensing it into knowledge, which can then be retrieved and acted upon. And so inevitably, when you take everything that has happened in humanity and sort of use that as the foundation for building intelligence, all the values and the biases and all the intrinsic systemic inequalities and differences get represented into those systems that we then create out of that. So all of AI and the automation that kind of comes out of it is going to be very strongly influenced by the values and the interests of the people who are designing it and who are using it. And in any system that we've developed, power tends to concentrate within the people who, or the organizations who can understand the source of power and can manipulate it the best. And so while AI may actually create many, many capabilities for a large number of people, ultimately, the people with more deep technological know-how and with deeper access and control today are going to be able to, influence and shape the direction in which a lot of development happens. They get to make decisions about what AI and artificial intelligence can do and cannot do. They will get to make decisions about who has access to this AI and at what price. They will get to determine how this AI is built and at what cost. And most importantly, they will have the ability to shape a lot of the discussion and a lot of the dialogue around the implications of automation in our overall workforce. Okay. So I see a lot of, faces that are a little bit worried here because I think I've painted a little bit of a gloomy picture. But, the game is not over as yet, right? It's not done and dusted. Things are not as bad as I may have made it seem. So the first is that, the current generation of models that we have and the artificial intelligence systems that we have, they're really not sophisticated enough to automate 1 billion jobs today. So that buys us time. There's time between where we are today and a future that is still distant. More importantly, one of the central mechanisms by which a lot of artificial intelligence works today it's just a mimicry of intelligence. It isn't actually, the ability to reason, the ability to conduct a rational thought, and figure out, interesting solutions to problems. It's not quite there yet. So that's another aspect by which, while it seems that artificial intelligence is ready to kind of take over the world, what we're seeing right now is, incredibly talented mimics. The parrot that I put up there. So I'm definitely not trying to trivialize the accomplishments of the AI systems that exist today and the incredible capabilities that they have. I'm just pointing out that there is a lot of work between here and the future in terms of being able to do things like conduct rational thought, conduct scientific experiments, be able to devise strategies. That heavy lifting is still not done. So that's one advantage that we have right now. And then the second advantage, or sort of the second obstacle, is that this is still a very, very competitive field. And the more that we do, and the more that our institutions do to encourage competition in this field, I think the stronger the outcomes will be for everybody involved. Because competition is actually the one thing that can help to make sure that biases and different value systems do not get clobbered in the race to kind of develop artificial intelligence. And so it is really, really important that as new AI systems develop and we kind of like find ways that artificial barriers to entry are not created. And more efforts are made to do the research out in the open, to build open source foundational models, and to create on-ramps that can help to lower some of the barriers for people to enter into this space, to ensure that many different voices, many different interests and value systems can get represented as AI systems develop. So that leaves me with, couple of, questions that are in my mind, which I think are sort of burning questions, and I'm sure lots of questions in your minds as well. The first amongst which is, what happens when labor stops being scarce and starts to become abundant? When people or organizations can essentially buy an infinite supply of labor, not through people, but through automation and through artificial intelligence. When that fundamental relationship or economic relationship of people, where we exchange our labor in order to earn a living, when that fundamental relationship breaks and goes away, what happens to the world and what happens to our society? And then the second question that is sort of like, in my mind, a really important one is like, what becomes the role of education? If we have artificial intelligence, which can do all kinds of thinking and can solve all kinds of problems, then, what role does education and play in a person's upbringing? So those are the two like big ones in my mind, and I'm sure there's many others in other people's minds. So with that, I think I'll bring my remarks to a close and turn it over to you, Jagan.
Thank you, Shailesh. Please have a seat. Thanks, Shailesh. That was very engaging and thought-provoking as well. I'm not sure that there was a sort of a grim atmosphere in the room. It was more just, it's difficult to absorb all of this. It's very profound. So, something that you do on a regular basis, we get very few opportunities to do this. I want to actually engage you on the two questions you've raised. I think that would be most appropriate. But perhaps to go a little deeper into that. You mentioned, for instance, when labor is abundant, says a situation like in India, we will be seeing a future where there is a gig economy. And I think that's a term that we often read about, but most of us don't quite understand it because it's intricate. It's intrinsically linked to the AI world. It's the AI that will help us build the gig economy. What is the gig economy, and how does the nature of work itself change in an era of AI? Could you shed some light on that?
Sure. So the gig economy, I think, in many ways, is used as a umbrella term for sort of temporary, casual kind of work. If you think of the many Zomato delivery people who are delivering food, or the Uber drivers and the Ola drivers, and various other services that are being provided. So it's kind of like used as an umbrella term. So that's kind of like one level of it. And then there's a lot of freelance creatives and professionals who are working in sort of like the freelance sector as well. And so the gig economy is kind of, this economy where I don't have long-term employment. I don't have like a full-time job. I pick up gigs, so maybe I'm doing a project for somebody for 2 weeks, and then after that I'm not employed, and then I have another. So it's this, I wouldn't call it informal, but maybe less structured full-time employment, right? And so, a lot of the work that is being done in this gig economy in many ways is vulnerable to automation. Especially a lot of the creative professions, because because a lot of the creative professions work in the digital space today, and that is sort of one of the areas where AI and artificial intelligence tools excel at. So they're really excellent at producing digital artifacts, right? Like movies and images and text and things like that. So you can imagine that people who used to have a job as a copywriter may find over time that publishing houses are able to automate a lot of that, because there are artificial intelligence tools that can do that. So this is kind of what I mean about artificial intelligence and the gig economy kind of coming closer.
In the late 19th century in Europe, there was a lot of critique of industrialization, and people said that these factories are making servile human beings work in the most inhumane ways. So in some fundamental sense, 100 years later, we seem to be now finally reaching a point where we can let go of the Fordism, the Taylorism, and all of that. But what will replace that is still enigma, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's really the question, right? Like, what happens and what will replace, what comes next, right? I think in many ways, as different cultures are sort of like grappling with the same problem, it's a rich time to potentially be a little experimental and try different things, because I don't think anybody really has a particular idea of like or any sort of evidentiary basis to say, okay, this is what is going to work, right? This is a solution that will kind of like help everybody. So in some parts of the world, they're experimenting with basic income as kind of like a fundamental right. Everybody gets some basic income. In other parts of the world, they're sort of like encouraging people to follow their, not necessarily like to fund their sort of creative pursuits in some way, right? So it's just not an income, but if you sort of work on certain creative like art or things like that, then you can get funding to support you, right? So I think this is a rich time to start discussing some of these questions, and look at what can come next, what could potentially solve this.
And it seems that AI is becoming more and more accessible. I mean, our WhatsApp now has a Meta AI in it, and we are all using it.
Yeah.
How accessible is it likely to get? I mean, is it going to get into different languages or accessible through different languages?
Yeah.
Where's the future of all of this? Because it's likely to become ubiquitous.
Absolutely. I think it is very likely and very probable to become ubiquitous. It is going to sort of go into multiple different languages for sure. But I think one of the interesting questions is going to be, how effective is it in every language? Because a lot of the capabilities of artificial intelligence today depend on the amount of data that is available to train it. So if you have the more data you have available to train an artificial intelligence, the better it can perform. And so one of the biases that exists in the world today is that data in English is far more by maybe thousands of times more prevalent available than data in other languages. And so there is definitely a path from here where English-based artificial intelligence is more capable and more powerful than a Swahili or a Hindi-based. Hindi maybe not as bad, but some of the smaller languages.
Yeah, I'm sure
So like that's one path that we could go. But then if there are enough incentives and if there is enough effort made to augment the data that's available in other languages by people who care deeply enough about making sure that AI is accessible in other languages, then it's not an inevitability, right? We don't necessarily have to go down only one path. But
so we should hope to be able to speak Sanskrit at some point, all of us.
Hopefully, hopefully we can talk to an AI in Sanskrit in English, exactly. And it may respond to us.
You just mentioned something about train the AI. I think this is a concept that I think many people in the auditorium might find a little difficult to understand.
Yeah.
Is it like a pet dog? I mean, you train it to do certain things?
In many ways it is. It is like training a pet dog, but it's just sort of like the mechanisms are slightly different.
Okay.
So I remember when I was training my dog, it was kind of, you ask it to do something, and then when it does that, you kind of give it a reward, and you give him a reward, and he gets a treat. So in AI also, it is a very similar kind of a setup. You have some data which tells you that, when X happens, after X happens, Y happens, right? And so you give X as an input to your AI system. And if the AI system says Y happens next, then you say, good dog, here's a reward for you. And if it doesn't say Y, if it says Z happened, you say, no, you got it wrong. Actually, you have to do Y. And then you ask the AI to sort of, adjust its inference mechanism, how it makes these decisions, to move a little bit closer in the direction of Y. Right? And so that's this process of training. Now, the difference is that, I would maybe train my pet for half an hour and, maybe go through some exercise 15 or 20 times. With artificial intelligence, in half an hour, you would give it, maybe 100 million times you have trained it and given it feedback and told it that you're doing a good job or not doing a good job. So that's
the
kind of
speed at which it learns is exponentially
larger. Right? Yeah.
So let's come to the role of education,
sure.
Right? Which you asked us a question about. It's a complex subject because it's ultimately we choose to get an education that has a direct line of sight on, say, a occupation, a job.
Right.
You've just said that the world of jobs is itself going to be
very
seismically affected.
Yeah.
So how exactly are we going to be able to answer that question about education? What is the right education? Is it that all of us must learn programming, for instance? All of us must do what?
Yeah, I to be honest, I don't know the answer to this.
Okay.
I think there are probably people who are much smarter than me and much more well versed with education and how it will develop who can answer that question. I think from my side, I would only say that I think one of the fundamental skills that we all have to probably try to grasp is the ability to continuously relearn new ways of doing things that we may have thought that we have mastered, right? I think sort of that seems to be at least one certainty amongst all this ambiguity and all this uncertainty that things are going to change so quickly and things are going to change so rapidly that we will just have to continue, relearning many things. And so I think like that's, that may be actually the fundamental of education, is just learning how to learn and not learning any one thing in particular.
Thanks. I have just one more question, and then we'll open up
Sure.
to the audience.
Yeah.
And it would be wrong of me not to address the question of infrastructure.
Yeah, of course.
As you can
of
well
course.
imagine. One can understand that there is an infrastructure associated with AI itself, which is the
Sure.
server farms and
Yeah.
digital infrastructure and all of that. But what we are also finding is that AI is going to affect the other sort of regular infrastructure like transportation, water supply, sanitation. What's your sense of where India is in this regard? Are we likely to see a lot more absorption of AI into possibly the construction, planning of infrastructure, the operations of infrastructure? A speculative answer would be fine.
Yeah, I'm not so well versed with sort of the planning side of it,
Sure.
so I kind of like leave that out. I think definitely on the operational side of it, I think the efficiencies that come from artificial intelligence, from automation, from computerization, right? That efficiency is definitely going to be a sort of source of pressure on various, in fact, on all industries to sort of, improve costs, to reduce costs, to improve margins, to be able to operate far more efficiently and effectively, to be able to anticipate, potential problems proactively rather than reactively. So I think if as a sort of economy we are going to be competing globally, and a global system is going to move towards more automation, towards across industries, then from a competitive standpoint we will definitely feel the pressure to be able to sort of match and if not like exceed what's happening across the world.
I guess the good thing is that infrastructure produces so much data, which is
Correct.
what AI kind of survives on, right?
That's
That's
right.
the fodder
Yeah.
for AI.
Yeah.
So there's potentially a lot of positive things on efficiency and
Absolutely.
possibly even reducing costs and such like.
Yeah, reducing cost, reducing wastage, being able to reduce downtime,
That's right.
and sort of
Yeah.
be more productive overall. I think artificial intelligence can play a big role in almost all of these aspects.
And possibly we are not giving enough credence to these incidents or examples of AI applications in our real world. I mean, we have a driverless metro train in India,
Yeah,
in Delhi, and
Yeah.
most people don't know this. And
Yeah.
just understanding how that could be is a useful thought experiment. Okay, so let's open up to questions from the audience.
Thank you so much for this talk and talking about the subject. I have one question and one comment.
sure.
So on the education part that you mentioned, so there's a curriculum developed by UNESCO called Media and Information Literacy, which really deals about that in the near future, when you have the tools to access information, how we train the current and the future generation more in the context of critical thinking, empathy, mindfulness, which is very inherent to human. The second is more in the context, let's assume like, we have the AI tool for everything that we do, but there's another side of it that, climate change is reality, and with the temperature rising up and the kind of energy input that it requires to develop that kind of amazing systems, how you think, that's going to happen? Like, because AI will need energy.
Absolutely.
And that's, if you can just step it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm Jaimini Mehta. I'm an architect. I have come here from Baroda. Not for this lecture, but I happen to be here, so I'm here. Your first dozen or so slides more or less replicated the process that Industrial Revolution took as the knowledge revolution. It's the same trajectory you showed. So However, you made one statement that competition will create equality. And you showed the image of a sumo wrestler. This is not very clear, apprehensible as to how AI will reduce conflict or even competition is a part of the conflict.
Yes.
What is happening now is that if industrial revolution replaced what our limbs used to do, hands and body, feet, now the processes that are happening in the mind is replicated outside of mind,
Yes.
which fundamentally changes the relationship between the subjective and the objective. What guardrails we can imagine for AI to either reduce or eliminate global conflict?
So let me start with both of these questions, right? One is with regards to energy, and the other one regards to global conflict. So I think on the energy front, I think it's a very, very pertinent question. I think some of these AI systems are consuming, as much energy as some small cities do. And so I think that is a very interesting question that needs to be sort of front and center of the research that goes into this, about how to build AI systems that are less energy intensive and less demand less to be able to kind of like reach that level of proficiency. The other side of it is to say that, we are trying to condense a process of learning which would take a human, a lifetime to learn, into the space of about, 2 or 3 weeks, right? We try to train an artificial intelligence system over the course of 2 or 3 weeks, and at the end of that, we expect it to be, proficient across a whole spectrum of human abilities, which would take people a lifetime to master. So in many ways, we are sort of, compressing a lifetime of energy that a human would use into just 2 or 3 weeks. But that's not to say that it's a free chit, right? And I think that's one of the key questions that is there about, who gets to decide how AI systems are built and at what cost, right? Like, who gets to decide that this environmental cost of producing energy is too high and that the AI systems must be more efficient, right? I think like that's a very, very important question. I think we did that for cars, for example. They came about regulations to say that cars have to be meet certain energy efficiency requirements, and I can definitely foresee a future where those people who are training massive AI models have to have some energy efficiency requirements as well. But it may not be immediate, right? Like that may take a little period of time, because doing it right now may sort of, slow things down too much. So the interest and everybody's outlooks may not align immediately for that kind of a regulation. So now on the second question that you asked about, how can AI help to reduce global conflict, and what role does competition play in developing more equitable artificial intelligence? I think like where I see it is that the more people there are who are building fundamental artificial intelligence systems, the less likely it is that any one system or creator will get to dominate and take over and dictate terms to everybody else. So if you look at the world today, there are probably 4 or 5 large tech companies in the world who are investing deeply into building artificial intelligence systems, and I think that that's too small. 4 or 5 is very easy for there to be collusion, for there to be informal agreements and things like that, right? So it would be much healthier for society as a whole if there were hundreds of organizations that were building artificial intelligence systems, keeping in mind the various needs and the various benefits that could come to a lot of different people.
That kind of a knowledge equality
Yeah,
takes a huge time span.
that's right.
And centuries.
I mean, even today, the capabilities and the knowledge and the number of startups that are working in this space is tremendous. There are hundreds of companies and fledgling organizations that are working in this space. They may not all have the resources and the capital necessary to be able to compete at the scale with.
I'm not about companies, I'm talking about individuals.
Right. I think there are lots of individuals, and I think they are spread out, and the talent exists. Yes, it is still a very specialized talent, right? Like, at one point in time, nuclear scientists were a fairly rare breed, and that was kind of a rare talent to have. So similarly, artificial intelligence talent and individuals with that knowledge is very much limited. But one of the great advantages that I think artificial intelligence has in comparison with, say, the development of nuclear energy is that all the research is happening in the public domain. Every company, every research institution publishes, dozens of papers every year. And so those with sort of, the background and the interest can fairly easily, okay, maybe not easily, but can with a fair amount of effort on their own part kind of, get to the point where that knowledge they can imbibe that knowledge. It's not hidden away. It's not happening in secret. It's not happening in the shadows where nobody knows what is going on. So I think, that is imperative for us to do overall to ensure that, this technology is developed in a manner where it is open, where people have access to learn about it, and that information spreads quickly and rapidly amongst those with the skills to be able to kind of absorb it and apply it. So that's what I think, right, by competition and spreading it.
Hi, Shailesh. My name is Ranjit. Thanks for this very interesting discussion that you triggered. Two questions. One, which sectors, I think top three in your mind, would be impacted, do you think, the most or the earliest, and which three or four would probably the least? That's
Okay.
one.
Yeah.
Secondly, what kind of risk mitigation and regulatory mechanisms do you think could or would be put in place so as to minimize the negative aspects of AI?
Sure. Two really interesting questions. I think customer service is definitely one where, I think probably many of us have seen websites where they have chatbots and things like that. So I think that's definitely an industry where there is going to be rapid adoption of artificial intelligence because, language is one of the crucial skills that has kind of like reached a human level of performance. So I think that's kind of a big one. I think potentially there are lots of manufacturing industries which can see the introduction of robotics and artificially intelligent systems to be able to not just do repetitive, just like the same thing over and over again, which is what a lot of mechanization does today, but also to be able to make subjective decisions during like the manufacturing process. Another area in manufacturing which is very, very sort of interesting for artificial intelligence is essentially preventive measures. So instead of in a manufacturing, you can think of a factory. If something goes wrong, you have to take a reactive step to correct it. If I have a machine which breaks down, then I have to get that machine repaired, and maybe I have to shut down a certain amount of production while that machine gets repaired. So proactive artificial intelligence being able to predict that, based on various signals, that this machine looks like it may have a problem in the future, in the near future, can actually be another application. So that's, I think, another industry which is fairly ripe. In terms of things which I think are probably most secure, I think it's not as much a factor of capabilities, but more a factor of comfort of the person on the receiving end. So, for instance, I think the medical profession is probably fairly secure, because I think individuals' comfort in going to see an AI doctor is going to be relatively harder to overcome. Similarly, with, say, a profession like a lawyer, or an advisor, a financial advisor, or things like that. Those professionals may in turn actually use artificial intelligence tools to make themselves far more productive than they are today. But in a lot of these industries, like, the face of it is still going to be a person, because that's what we're going to remain comfortable with. So that's what I think of in terms of like adoption cycle. In terms of your question around regulation and what are the risks that are there, I think one of the fundamental risks from a regulatory perspective is trying to regulate the technology itself. And I think there's a lot of, especially in the United States and in the United Kingdom, there have been sort of some of these initial attempts to try and regulate artificial intelligence as a technology. And I think that's a little bit, I would say, too broad of an attempt. It's far better to try and regulate the applications of the technology rather than the technology itself. Because, as a technology, you can use something in many different ways, right? I think one really simple or a frequently used example is an electric motor. Right? I can use an electric motor as a guidance system on a missile, but I can also use an electric motor to pump water out from the ground. And so if we try to regulate the manufacturers of electric motors, I think it's just, it's too difficult to do that, and it will just kind of like hamper that entire development process. But we can regulate the applications, right? We can regulate the manufacturers of guided missiles to be like, that's an application, and that area is regulated. So from a risk perspective, I think one of the biggest risks I see in regulation for artificial intelligence is sort of like overreaching to try to regulate the technology too broadly, instead of focusing on specific applications which are harmful. For example, using artificial intelligence to spread misinformation, or using artificial intelligence to, defraud somebody for, through some scam or something like that, right? So I think those are far more fertile grounds for regulation.
Thank you for raising all these questions that we're all thinking about and talking about. My question dovetails on two previous conversations, including the one on education and the areas that will be affected first. And you mentioned the gig economy.
Yes.
I've been in higher education for a long time, and I now consult with an edtech startup where most employees are 26 years old.
Wow.
And they are very much a part of the gig economy. And I also work closely with other groups who are either copywriters or digital marketing professionals and so on. All of those sectors will be affected, as you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of talk about keeps upskilling, kuch seekhte jao, badhte jao, etc., etc. So my question is, what do you think in this current scenario should be the meaning of that upskilling? Should it be about main data science ka ek course aur kar lu? Remember that most of these young aspiring people are tier 2, tier 3. They're not necessarily people who live outside Habitat Center.
Sure.
So should they be doing that? Or do you think it's really important to bring back some of the elements that have not been part of our education system The gentleman here mentioned about courses on empathy and so on. But critical thinking, I was thinking about, and another concept I just read recently about, which is transition adaptability, which I thought was so interesting, that it's really talking about resistance to change,
Right.
and being out of your comfort zone. So what do you think, what would be your advice to people who are in their 20s to say how should they be preparing if they are part of semi-gig or gig economy?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very interesting question about how
Shall I
to
give
prepare.
you a moment to
Sure.
just think
Let
about
me
it?
do
Let's
that.
take the other two questions, sir. And sir.
So I just wanted to give a little context to
Could you? Yeah, no, just.
I just wanted to give a little context to AI. So I started BPO services in the 80s. And at that time, there was a lot of fear that people would, be unemployed. We have so many people. You bring computers in, what is going to happen? Okay. And we know that nothing happened. Lots of jobs were created. On the other hand, at that time, we also had MTNL, which had a monopoly over phones. And by getting the mobile phones, we democratized communication. Similarly, we used to have Indian Posts, which was the monopoly on sending letters. But with email and with courier services, we democratized that. Everybody has a phone today. And that phone is more powerful than the computer I had in the 80s. So my sense is that AI would probably go in the same way as communication or as computer services, where we shouldn't be afraid of it. There is a huge possibility. I think the only jobs which have gone are those of typists and stenographers. Okay. Other than that, computers have created huge number of jobs. Mobile phones have created a huge whole industry. Now there was Nokia which came first, but Nokia is nowhere there today. There's so many mobile companies, and so we shouldn't be afraid of AI really. And I wanted to ask you, do you think that analogy is real?
Yeah, I think this is these two questions
Go ahead.
kind of like come together really beautifully. So I think you're absolutely right that the wave of computerization and the knowledge economy that built produced new sets of jobs and new things, new capabilities that we could not have even conceived of 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So it is very likely that there will be a new wave or a new plane of work that gets created where certain kinds of work gets eliminated. So I think that's very true. I think the factors to keep in mind are, one, that the speed at which that change will happen. With computerization and the development of communications technologies, some of those changes entered into our workforce and entered into the way that we work over multiple decades. And so there was plenty of time to adapt. And so, when that time frame gets compressed down to 4 or 5 years or 7 years, the time for adaptation is less. Which brings to the question that the lady asked here about upskilling and how do we reskill and what are the skills that will be important, right? And I think one of the areas that sort of comes to my mind is that what will fundamentally remain a very human capability will be in the emotional plane, right? Like if you think of it as a hierarchy of human capabilities, right? We have the physical capability, then we have the intellectual capability, and then there is sort of the emotional capability. And so very possible that work transitions in this direction as well, where we go from the physical to the intellectual to the emotional, right? And so, people who do transition support, who can sort of develop empathy skills that you spoke about, and kind of function in that emotional plane, there may be a whole bunch of new work and professions that emerge in those domains overall.
My name is Subhash Verma, and I specialize in the area of perception management. So that is my work. So when we discussed to start from mindfulness, that was considered once, which is certainly AI. I don't know whether it will ever reach that stage. Yeah. And the case of computers that we talked about, computers in comparison to artificial intelligence were passive, while artificial intelligence is active and is learning every day and teaching us new things. So from that point of view, not only the pace, but the content and the methods in which it will interact with our thinking is very different and at higher level. So that is one thing that to be considered. Personally, I'm not afraid of. Just a moment. Personally, I'm not afraid of AI, but I see it when you say the presentations were made through AI, and that's a great thing that it can do immediately for you. So the creative input that came immediately is an input to the human society. All of us benefited from it. One thing that education can do, or it has always done, it has given us the ability to meet life's situations. In every age, education has been different, and our response to our situations have been different. So from that point of view, if AI can really support us in thinking differently and also considering human values together, it's a great thing to have. And my own perception is that it will help the intelligent people and creative people more than those who see it to be kept away from. But intelligent people will benefit, and it will learn our bad things as well. If you speak foul language to it, it will learn. If you speak good language to it, if you teach kindness, it will learn kindness. So there's a big responsibility on humanity to respond and teach it to help us rather than to hurt us. That's my observation.
Absolutely.
Tell me something about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very true.
I agree with you 100%, right? That the way in which we develop AI and the values that we use when we are building these systems are going to get reflected back when these systems are put into the real world. And I think that's a very, very foundational part of how these things develop. When it comes to what you mentioned about education and how AI can actually play a role in education, I think that's a really, really interesting and very, very powerful idea. One of the things that is totally possible through even the technology that exists today is to take any piece of content or material, educational material, and repackage it in a form that is personalized to the individual who's consuming it. So my world is, say, in computer science, right? And if I'm, say, reading an article about finance, I may not understand as much of it, but an AI system could definitely take that article that is written about finance and rewrite it using concepts that are from computer science to make it easier for me to understand. Similarly, my concepts that are things that are in computer science, somebody is an artist, those concepts could be rewritten in language and in terms that they would understand more easily. So the ability to take content and personalize it down to the individual level for an educational perspective is actually incredibly powerful as well for AI systems, right? So I think both of those things that you said about like how AI can be an enabler for learning, and also that the values that we embody when we are training it will get reflected back to us. I think both of them hold very, very strong.
We have a question there.
Jagan, so this is Vinayak Chatterjee. I'm actually going to deflect a question to a very interesting person sitting on the first row, Mr. Vijay Thadani, because of the conversation on education. So Vijay and Rajendra Pawar participated in the crossroads of history when the manual economy went to a computer economy. and they set up NIIT, right? Early 80s? 81. Now we are facing another crossroad of evolution, as was explained by Shailesh in his slide, that society has to get used not to computerization, but to artificial intelligence. As a founder of NIIT, as an educationist yourself, as a founder of Nimrana University, what are your thoughts on this subject that Shailesh raised, that what is going to happen to education? And do you think NIIT type institutions will come up to teach society about artificial intelligence? If you don't mind, I'm going to ask Vijay Thadani.
Please. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Most of the things which you said were wrong. Like always. But definitely, I think I was reflecting on how you put forward how education will be. You actually asked the question of why education. I mean,
What is the role?
Everything that
Yes.
you need is there. Why education? It's like saying, why should I work with my hands now that I have machines? And so why exercise my hands? So all I'm saying is, if I overgeneralize, I said every time technology moved or technology came into human space, some part of routine went away and some higher order possibilities existed. So if I was to continue in that thinking process, fine, we moved from manual work to computers, and now we have computers that can think, not yet reason, but can at least think.
Yes.
So that's yet one more level of automation, if I just consider it that. But I think in the space of education by itself, I was hoping that you would talk about the fact that one of the areas which will go through a massive revolution is education itself. Because obviously, first, what needs to be taught itself
Has to
will
change.
will get changed. Second, not what needs to be taught, but how it is taught. So if you look at our education system, it is actually an optimization exercise. You have only X number of teachers, but you have Y number of students. So you put them in groups, and then the teacher hopes that the teacher will be able to reach to everyone. And therefore, teacher teaches to the average of the class. So the brilliant ones get bored, and the duffers actually look at the more brilliant ones and learn from them. Right? That's how it happens. So who learns? It's really a question mark. And I was very intrigued by the fact that you agree with the fact. So the personalization aspect.
Absolutely.
So I think AI has a phenomenal opportunity to personalize education, in which case the whole format of a classroom itself is up for a debate. The whole concept of one teacher to many students is up for debate. The concept of should there be a class in the first place is itself. Should there be a book which everybody has to go by, or I have my book and he has his book and you have your book, which means hyper-personalization. What in e-commerce used to be called market of one is now we can talk about class of one.
Absolutely.
It's the class in which every student is behaving, is getting education exactly the way he needed. The Guru Shishya, where Guru was hyper-personalizing to every Shishya.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So that, I think, is a possibility that you can see.
Absolutely. Right. And even I would say, even the, like you said, the book changes, even the path through the education system. We all sort of have a current system where, okay, in first grade you learn certain things, in second grade you learn the next things, in third grade you learn the next things, right? It's not necessary for us to follow that path. It's very, very possible that everybody has a custom journey through the education system, learning things in order of their curiosity and in order of, what are the things that are most, fascinating to them and what they want to explore in order to sort of like achieve certain outcomes, right? So, I don't see any reason why, a child who's interested in building things spends many years at the beginning of their journey in studying maths and science, and then comes to languages and other things later on, and follows their own path through a curriculum of learning.
And therefore, you create micro credentials.
Sure,
and
certainly.
you add up those micro credentials, and when you have 100, then you go and collect a degree.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And so on and so forth. So I think, just to answer your question, Vinayak, those
Thank
are
you.
some of the areas that
Thank
we
you.
are working on, struggling with. Yes.
So I wasn't wrong there.
No, you were wrong that we have arrived. No.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
think it's a
Thadani.
struggle.
Thank
I think the interesting opportunity which AI offers in a country like ours, where the language barrier itself is a very big deterrent of everything reaching everybody.
Right.
So the language barrier just disappears.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
Gen AI is a fantastic example. A very well trained LLM can handle that part. So I can only understand Gujarati, and my teacher is speaking in English, but I'm understanding in Gujarati the way my teacher is speaking, and so on and so forth. Obviously, there are nuances and all these things which will come along. That's one area. And the second area where I think we talked about physical infrastructure, we thought we had missed the bus of electronics and chips. And now that data centers, which are suddenly going to come back in vogue and in large supply, I think for a place which is a country like India, which has abundant solar power and a lot of natural energy, I think once again for creating that digital infrastructure, data center is again a very, very promising space, which will require newer order skills. Yeah, you would agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we were talking about energy and what the infrastructure, physical infrastructure that artificial intelligence requires, right? And they are consuming power and need server farms and things like that. So I think, yeah, absolutely, there will be a huge demand for, this kind of physical computing infrastructure across the country. Absolutely.
And that will also get miniaturized, and it'll get distributed and, site specific or whatever.
So, yeah, as the
Possibly.
sun rises, the work also shifts from data center to data center.
That's right.
So that
Yeah.
it follows the
Yeah.
sun.
I think we have a question back there as well. Yes, ma'am.
Mine is not really a question, Madhu Madan. I think it's more a comment and an observation I'd like to make. And I'm just looking at my own life, where earlier when Google came, and I'm talking about the 90s, one would spend time sifting through to get an answer. Now I just type in a question and I have a whole lot of information that comes. So I just think for people like us, AI has been a real boon. It's just made life so much easier. And I think that is where we will see people going. And yes, I think relationships where you have, a job where relationships are important, those will probably stay. But a lot of these repetitive things, or, the travel agents, what is the route I should take, or what itinerary I should follow. Today, ChatGPT gives me a wonderful itinerary. If I've got 3 days in Rome or 4 days in Rome, it even gives me the best walks around Rome.
Yeah.
So I think that way it's made life much, much easier for all of us. So there's just an observation, and any comments you may have on that.
For people who are comfortable with the technology, for the people who can maximize the efficiency that it gives them, these things are going to be, incredibly powerful assistants, buddies, so to speak, right? And they're going to make our lives much, much easier than before. Yeah.
Okay, we have another question there.
Hi, sir. Thank you for conducting this talk. I'm Omram. I'm an intellectual property lawyer. So I see AI as a challenge to creative people. So for example, in this space, I am sure that some of the information which is required is proprietary in nature. So the AI, what it does is it takes information, it processes, and it gives output. But people who are creative, they are devoid after a few days, or their value is reduced in terms of intellectual effort, because AI has learned that thing and is now independently creating that thing. So what challenges do you see in this space, particularly the information which is being processed? I'm unsure of the information which is proprietary in nature in this space. So I just wanted to know what information is proprietary in this space, which can be protected through intellectual properties.
Right. Yeah, I think this is a very sort of, there's lots of mixed opinions in this space. There's lots of ongoing legal cases, and people are arguing the merits of the various points of view on this. So I think, like, for certain, some of our intellectual property laws will have to evolve because I don't think they have anticipated such a situation, right? So far, our intellectual property laws have sort of tended to focus on complete duplication, right? Copyright, where you make a full copy of something. And so this current state of the world, where I take in, hundreds of thousands of examples, and then I remix them all together and produce something that is, not a copy of any one of the originals, is sort of, something that's not really covered well by existing intellectual property law. So I think there's definitely got to be an evolution and a reevaluation of what that means. Some of the interesting verdicts or judgments that have come out is that, the content that is produced is no longer copyrightable. So, if I sit in front of an image AI and give it hundreds of prompts and use those hundreds of prompts to generate some, beautiful image or something, that image is no longer copyrightable, right? And I think people have tried to argue to say, well, there was a creative effort to tune and figure out the right prompt to be able to generate a particular kind of image. And so there is definitely some creative process that has gone into that. But the courts have found that is not sort of like defensible from a property standpoint. So I think it's an evolving area, and there is probably no technological answer to the question that you have. I think it's a lot more of a question for the court system to figure out where the boundaries lie, and probably for some of the law itself to sort of like evolve to help to cover some of these scenarios.
One type of information could be architectural designs which can be protected. So what other information in this space can be protected? I'm just curious to know.
I mean, any proprietary information could be protected. So if I am, say, a photographer, and I have taken photographs, then I could sort of say that these photographs are proprietary, and in order, you cannot use them to, train an AI model. But somebody else could have taken a photograph of the same thing. Somebody could have taken a photograph of my photograph from a slightly different angle, and then that can be unprotected, right? So where does the line, where exactly is the line is something that, as technologists, we don't have an answer to.
I think it's obviously forced us to ask fundamental questions, which perhaps we didn't need to ask for the last 100 years, and now it's a new frontier of questioning. Yeah. Shailesh, I'm going to draw this to a close unless there is one final last question. Yeah. Okay, shall we take two? We have enough time? Yeah. Okay. So one here and ma'am.
Okay, Shailesh, this is on the lighter note, okay?
Sure.
As you know, I'm in the education space. So right now I'm going through these appraisals of teachers, the increment basis is based on their responses. So most of the teachers are actually, half of them can't write English. So what they're doing is that they're just copying answers, they're asking the AI to do that. And so is there any way we can get to know it's a response from AI? I mean, if I type the entire content and put it back to Meta, you think the same thing will show up? I mean, how do we know it's an original answer and not from AI? It's not, like in plagiarism, like,
right.
So just help me out here.
Yeah, so I think this is a question that's come up in a lot of universities as well, about detecting AI driven answering, and there's two dimensions I think to this, to solving this problem. First, there are tools which can do some work to give you some estimate or likelihood that this content was produced by an AI system or not, like whether ChatGPT wrote it or some other system wrote it. They're not superbly accurate. It can give you an indication, but you cannot rely on it blindly. So if it says something is definitely written by an AI, may not be. That may be that person itself sort of writes in a vocabulary that is similar to what an AI would produce, right? So I think that's one. There are tools which can help. I think the other direction of it is that the nature of assessment itself has to change, right? And I think one very interesting exercise that I read about was a course where a professor asked their students to take a particular topic, go to an AI like a ChatGPT, and get ChatGPT to write an essay about that topic and bring it into class. And then students had to exchange these AI generated essays and critique them in class. And so the assessment was no longer to sort of produce something, but to critique something that has already been produced, right? And it's kind of in the lines of, okay, some mechanical process of writing something is now being automated. We have to shift our sort of abilities to a slightly higher level, and sort of analyzing and critique becomes sort of the way in which we assess, right? So that's, I think, another dimension to this.
Great.
Just in a case like this, if you and me ask the same question, and the answer is the same, I'm in my own bunch of students.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then it also means that it's not exact. You can't really pinpoint, I've actually flummoxed some AI answers.
Yeah, of course.
That means you're fooling me.
Yeah.
So it gave me saying, I didn't mean to say this, and you're very apologetic.
Yeah. Absolutely. You can totally do that. You can totally play games with the AI, right?
Just like your pet dog, you can.
Yeah. When it gives you an answer, you can tell it that the answer that you've given me is completely factually incorrect. And then it will apologize to you and produce a new answer where it will make up new stuff.
One day on its own, it sent me a link. The next day it said, I don't see two links. I said, no, what you did yesterday? I don't recall anything that I sent to you yesterday.
So behavioral psychology of AI.
Yeah, it is. It is unpredictable.
And one day it gave me some reference to something that I asked a week back. The next day it said, I don't recall anything that I said yesterday. So it's the kind of responses you get from your spouse also.
Who is not artificial.
I think we'll go back to the original.
Shailesh, we have one more question.
Yeah. Sure.
Thank you. We have one more question.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Hemant. I work in a bank. I'm in finance. So I have this one question where you see, I work for 5 days a week, and if automation comes in, I work for 4 days or 3 days in a week, and then you see people doing different stuff other days of the week. Do you see things evolving that way, where work nature also shifts, where people don't have to go to office? Like now we don't, right? We work in a hybrid mode, and things like that have changed. So do you see that people evolving their work, and work not being the main thing that they do, maybe 4-day work week, and then other things evolving in their lives?
I don't know. I would like to think that may happen, but if I look back at the history or the evidence that is there, I think that it might be unlikely. There was, over the latter half of the 20th century, the promise of many time-saving inventions coming about, which would save us time and take away household chores and things like that, and it would free up more leisure time. But if you look at it, time-saving inventions definitely got used, but the time didn't necessarily go towards leisure. I think that, we just got into, in some ways, like our hamsters on a wheel, and we are just sort of like running headlong. So will we take this as an opportunity to step back and say that, okay, 3 days is enough, and I'm going to use the other 2 days for something else? I don't know. I'm not. I can't pretend to be a behavioral psychologist good enough to be able to answer that question. But it remains to be seen.
Thanks for the attempt. Yeah.
Okay, I think we can draw this to a close. Shailesh, Kochhar, thank you so much for
thank you so much,
absolutely
Jagan,
fascinating evening.
Infravision for having me. It was lovely to be here. Thank you so much.
I think we have a small gift from our side. Vinayak, please.
AI generated, so we have a shawl for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
AI generated suggestion, which said, "Give him a shawl." All the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Very nice.